Thanks for everyone joining on time. I know we're a little early still. We got three minutes or so. I'll maybe give a grace period, and then we'll hop in. We'll hop into the fun. But thank you for getting in early. I hope everyone's week is going fantastic. Thursday, it's very cold in New York. I think my California blood is paying the price, but we're here. We're having some fun. We're learning about AI. Got the kinks worked out this time. I know last time some issues getting going on the webinar. Technical difficulties, but now we've got it smooth so far. Fingers crossed, at least. One, 2 minutes till showtime. We'll let everyone get settled. Thanks everyone for coming on promptly today. Okay, well let's dive in. I know we're right on time here, but I think people will be able to join as they come. We've got a few folks on, and hopefully we'll get some more. And I know plenty will join the recording. But the goal of this, obviously, is that I think we're all hearing the stories of AI is going to change the world. We're all this possibility, all this kind of excitement around AI. But if many of you and the leaders that I talk to, what we're running into this challenge, this roadblock, is really ultimately around people are struggling seeing the results. People aren't seeing the results or not getting the impact that they were promised or they believe they could get through AI. So my hope is through the next 30, 45 minutes, I'll share some of the things that we've learned along the way in the past 8, 9, 10 years of building AI and ML solutions, and see how you might be able to take advantage of some of those things on your projects. Again, AI is going to be a big thing. I think we can all agree that, whether it's going to be as big as some people make it out to be, there is going to be some value with AI, and we're going to see some of this. Jensen Huang, obviously the legend, in many ways have been one of the leaders of taking over this transformation the last few years, has kind of made his bet on it. And he's biased, obviously, but I think there is clear, if you listen to a lot of the smart people, much smarter than me, you'll hear AI is here and it is going to make an impact. So despite all of that, despite all that hype, I think we all know, if you're here at least, many of these AI projects fail. And so I want to share some of these big reasons why they failed today and how you can help avoid it. A big reason for that ultimately comes down to trust, and I want to share a framework that you can use in terms of taking advantage of trust internally and externally, so that your projects gain traction. And then lastly, we're framing this up as design-led AI, and so I want to help figure out how you can align your projects with that measurable ROI so you can ultimately get that impact from AI as quickly as possible. And if you make it to the end, I'm going to give out a little bonus for those that make it to the end of this and have stuck with me and hopefully have learned something, but also give you a little something in return. So if that sounds good, let's kind of frame this up a little bit. So hopefully if you're here, you've experienced one of these pain points. I think this is how I would say what we're hearing a lot from the leaders that we work with. They're hearing about all these amazing business returns with AI, but they don't really see anything yet, right? Or their leadership is telling them, hey, we got to use AI, we got to build AI, but where do you begin? I don't know. And maybe there's concerns about, infosec, regulatory aspect, and what do those pieces mean? So these are a lot of the issues that we hear. And if you're having some of these or something similar, hopefully we'll be able to be in the right place. So who am I? Why am I even talking about this stuff? I know this is a little bit better looking than me. This is through a talk I'm giving around AI being kind of the new renaissance. And I really believe that there's a lot of parallels to the Renaissance in terms of how we're seeing things evolve culturally and business side. I've been building technology for over 20 years, helping companies go from idea to impact with any sort of technology. And over the years, whether it's AI, whether it's blockchain, whether it's just, straight up web applications, I've seen a lot of the same patterns start to come up where people treat things as technology problems when ultimately they're really design problems, they're really people problems, they're business problems. And so what I've kind of accomplished or found out over the years is that if you can really solve that business problem, you can really solve that user problem, and then put that together and form that technology solution, you're going to be able to solve these in a better way. And that's where my learning, my struggles, my failures over the years have really come to that, and ultimately have boiled down into this design-led AI process. I started a firm called Philosophy, rather, in 2008. We were a digital product consultancy. We built many software projects for enterprises. 5 years ago, or almost 5.5 years ago, we were acquired by Infobeans, which is an amazing organization that, again, helps companies build software. And it really boils down to building software that's for humans and made by humans, and building a great place to work within it. And we've solved lots of different projects over the years. Obviously, these days we do a lot of AI projects. This webinar is not an advertisement for Infobeans or for myself, but hey, if you have a need, if you think that we can help accelerate you, jumpstart your AI projects, your software projects, we'd love to chat. And we'll have a little bit of participation here in the show. I want to get some excitement. We'll have questions and Q&A at the end. But I also want to hear from you in terms of where your struggles are and where you are in terms of the AI adoption and readiness curve. So maybe to start off, let's just quickly give people a minute or two here to join the poll. Have you, if you're on this webinar, have you had the opportunity to start or launch an AI proof of concept, a pilot? Maybe you haven't gotten things to production yet, but maybe you have started to play with some things and you've tested it out. No people are on, so I'll give people a minute or two. Get settled, scan the QR code, or you can go to slido.com and type this in. Oh, don't be shy. There we go. There we go. We got someone. Thank you. Thank you. I know we had some people there. I see a bunch of people on, so good to see. We've had some people start. We have had some people haven't started anything. Maybe their team themselves has started to do, which is great. And maybe if we move over to the production side of things, how many of you have actually launched AI projects to production at this point? Okay, good. We've got some people that have made AI projects to production. That's a great sign. And we'll probably have a lot to listen and learn in the Q&A portion in particular from you. And you'll still be able to answer these Slidos throughout, and keep this up because you can answer questions as well. So really keen to hear from all of you. Awesome, a good mix of stuff. So, the reality is, despite all of this, despite all of the hype, I think we're all seeing there's a lot of pilots, a lot of experimentation, but not a lot of projects are actually seeing that ROI, seeing that business value. And I want to hear, like, what are challenges that you're seeing? What are challenges that you've run into from ROI, from AI? Scale, yeah. How do you scale that up? Trust, I think, is a big one I keep coming back to myself. I think we hear a lot from people just around, like, where do you begin? Like, how do you even start with this stuff? Hallucinations, yep. And I really believe that the hallucinations factor a lot into the trust side of things as well. If people don't know if this is real, this is not, like, how can we actually trust this sort of information that's coming back? Market fit, 100%. are people like actually going to use this thing, or are they finding things from a completely different area? Maybe it's you're trying to do something that's so big, so complex that it's actually really hard to pull off. Clear objectives. I'm loving it. I'm loving it because I'm seeing a lot of things that I believe as well, right? In terms of trust, the time, the cost, the objective side of things. These are all things that I really see. So really good news for me at least. I'm happy to see that I'm not a crazy person alone. So why? I think when you look at those pieces, there's three major factors that continue to come up. Trust, as I think was one of the big items there. The data side of things, there's lots of concerns about like our data isn't ready, our data strategy isn't set up. And then lastly, cost. Are we hitting the ROI? Are we seeing the business value? How do we actually sell this? How do we actually get this out into the market? And the data supports this, right? Bain Consulting did a very big study on why do these projects fail to reach production. And again, you see trust come up. You see the pieces around the quality, the hallucinations that was brought up before. You see the kind of regulatory uncertainty, maybe where does this information come from? People don't want to obviously share their company proprietary data with the foundational model companies. Their tech maybe isn't ready. Maybe their data just isn't ready. And then of course, like if you don't have the right use case, if you don't have the right objectives, if you can't show that ROI, you're going to come up flat. BCG, also big study of executives around AI. Trust continue to come up. Here are the challenges. Like we don't trust the information that's coming out. This could hallucinate. These are these big challenges and issues that continue to come up. So AI ultimately does have a trust problem. An enterprise is not going to send their data out to the foundational model company like Anthropic, OpenAI. They don't like, enterprises don't like black boxes. They don't like, and they can't risk hallucinations. And from an end user perspective, a prompt interface is very confusing. I don't know where to begin. I don't know where to start. So how do I kind of maneuver around that? What is my data? If I'm a user, I'm putting something in, like, is that training the system that's going to replace me from a job? Like, where's the bias in this? What is happening to the data? So we really believe in, and I've kind of come up with this approach and solution that is a tweak to some of the more common design processes and building software processes, really focused on ROI and trust. And the first phase of this, of design-led AI, is really thinking about how do we de-risk the trust side of things? How do we de-risk the data and the cost side of things? And ultimately coming up with a great business case. So we're able to prove out that ROI. And then the middle phase, the big chunk, is you're doing the rapid prototyping, you're experimenting, you're testing with quantitative and qualitative data, learnings to ultimately get to something that you can launch and feel comfortable with. But you can't just launch something willy-nilly within this AI world. You really need to think about setting things up with that privacy in mind. So you are kind of building that trust, observing, monitoring pieces, and then thinking about how you can give the humans the ability to override. And so that's what we'll be covering. And then I'm very keen to hear what people think, like, is it resonating or not as we go. I covered these on the last webinar. I just like to bring them up. You'll see a lot of our AI principles start to trickle into everything we do in terms of the process and everything. I recommend for your organization thinking about what are your AI principles? How do you think about things? For us, it's about speed. How can we get things to market faster? How can we leverage AI in our process? We've seen amazing speed improvements across our team by using AI at different places. Getting those small wins, demonstrating progress to the business, and building momentum by getting that business win early on. Really putting privacy first and foremost at whatever we do, because that's going to drive future work and kind of building that trust. And then we've got this black box problem with AI, right? People don't know how a decision was made. And so that's why explainable AI is really important. The companies that have more modular tech stacks are able to swap in and out models based on quality, costs. They're always moving, they're always improving. These are the companies that we're seeing win. And when you see about like APIs, making your APIs very accessible, this is really going to set you up for success on the agent side of things. So again, a lot of thinking, I would say, around how do you build out your modular tech stack so you can improve things. And then lastly, a lot of these AIs, especially when you think about LLMs, Gen AI, they're not fully ready to go end-to-end human. So you really need to think about how do you get the expert, the human in the loop, to give that feedback back to people. So here's my first secret is ROI, prove value early and often. A lot of AI projects fail because their ROI isn't clear up front, or it's ultimately measured too late. And I think this is the case with any technology project, right? If you aren't able to show the ROI, the benefit, it's very likely to be killed. And another problem is many times people are going too big. They're like, okay, this AI, this. I had a podcast with a chief innovation officer, Jeff Barry, and he was saying, don't be wary of Project X, where everything just gets stuffed into Project X, right? Any AI thing, Project X, but it just balloons and balloons and balloons, and then you never actually launch anything. So don't think about the value second. Think about the value first, and then think about how technology can support that. So for us, when we think about, again, our piece, it really comes down to a solid first foundation. It comes around to how do we identify and prioritize the business case so that we can ultimately show that value as fast as possible. So we've developed a workshop. I mean, there's many different ways that, of course, you can identify AI use cases. One way that I really like is kind of taking the impact mapping approach, where you first start with a goal. Like, are you trying to improve customer experience? Are you trying to have a lift in revenue? Are you trying to improve operational efficiency? And then who are the actors? Who are the people that can affect that goal? And then when you have those actors, what are the specific business metrics or impacts that you can move? Could you have a better conversion rate, a higher value package? And then from those, you think about the use cases. And what's really important is then your use cases here are tied directly into your impacts, directly into the who, and then ultimately the goal. And again, you need to think about, are these use cases aligned to the business goals, the business strategy, and ultimately the driver? That's first and foremost. We can all come up with tons and tons of ideas around AI use cases, but are they actually tied to what the business matters? That's very important step number one. The second is understanding, how do we prioritize these use cases? We're going to have lots of them, but we can't do them all, right? We need to start somewhere. And so again, we've built a tool. You'll get these slides and you'll be able to access this tool after this workshop to help do this, but you can also do this in a more traditional workshop setting. And so we look at, how do you prioritize things on one axis by business value, and on the other by what I'm calling outcome velocity. And outcome velocity is like, are your people ready? Are the people who are going to be using this system ready for AI? And also, how good is the data around that system? Is it being updated? Do you have the right quality within it? And then ultimately, when you think about this, is the business value good? Okay. And you think you can get to that outcome faster. That's a good place to start. For some teams that are newer in this journey, it might be okay if the business value isn't that big, but you think you can see a result really, really quickly. So take a look at that. Then we need to think about, what is that business case? Again, if you go too big, if you're too ambitious, it's very, very hard to actually execute within these and actually show that ROI. And if you go too small, you end up being too niche down and you actually don't see any result either. So you need to really think about, how do we balance the ROI? And then also the focus is really helpful, because what it helps you do is it helps you test the value and get that input sooner. It minimizes your security risk because you're not doing as much. And also, you're at the same time, you're not putting or requiring as much business data, which we'll talk about in a bit. And then lastly, it's helping reduce the risk of AI slop, which I think is a major problem these days in terms of AI just creating all this fluff. And once you have that kind of sense of, okay, here's the right area to start, we've put it together this very simple one-page business statement or business plan, in essence, to get this idea across the line. So what is that problem statement? Very simply, how will you, describe the pain point or the opportunity? And ideally, put that in quantifiable way. What's your one-sentence description of that solution? And then you've got this kind of fill in the blank. If we invest X amount into this AI project, we really think we're going to generate this much money in benefits, resulting in, a certain amount of ROI in a certain amount of time. And then again, thinking about, okay, we figured out what those business impact metrics were before in that workshop. What do we think we can improve? Can we decrease churn rate by 30%, for example? And then, of course, any of these projects are going to have risks. So think about, what are the risks that we have? And can you actually start to map out what are the mitigation strategies? And this kind of very simply starts to frame your team. It starts to help you think about, are we actually going to have an ROI from this project, and can we actually get this over the line in a reasonable amount of time? So that's step one, right? It's about thinking, and when you do an AI project in particular, measure ROI up front. Turn that AI into, from a buzzword, into really a results-driven strategy. So secret number two, we've talked about trust, right? Trust is all about building internal and external confidence. So many AI projects fail to reach its potential because both stakeholders, like your business stakeholders, as well as your end stakeholders, your end users, just don't trust it at the end of the day. And so when you don't have that internal trust, you're not able to get the solutions off the ground. And when you don't have the external trust, users ultimately won't engage in these projects. But one of the real tricks of all this is, of course, you can't demand trust. Trust has to be built over time, built systematically, and built very thoughtfully. And that's why, we've really pushed our design process to hone in on that. I think when you think about, digital transformation at large and moving to cloud, this was really a top-down driven approach to building software. And that worked because, you needed to get everyone aligned and kind of shift the whole organization and really just, let's say just do things from a digital perspective. But when we think about AI, a lot of this actually needs to be driven by the users, by the ground up. We need to understand from the business perspective how people are doing their jobs so we can build solutions that ultimately might change how they do their work. And I think this is a very big change in terms of how a lot of organizations think, but you do realize that so many organizations need the people, and it's going to change how they work, change how they do their jobs. And there's a real opportunity to do things amazingly and in much better and much more efficient way, free up people to do more interesting work. But you need to bring the people along for the ride, the team along for the ride. And to do that, you need to think about, there are some really big differences when you think about designing for AI. AI systems are non-deterministic. That means you put something in, you don't exactly know what's going to come back, right? So you need to think about, how does our interfaces start to evolve based on the data that's there? How does it change based on what we get back? Explainable AI, we talked about, right? Oftentimes these things can feel like black boxes. We need to show how decisions are made by the system. AI systems are going to evolve over time. They're going to learn, they're going to adapt, they're going to degrade based on, the user interactions, new data that's coming in. So you need to think about this. This is very different. The system is not always going to be the same. Feedback loops. I think a lot of times we need to think about, how are we designing input areas so that the machine can get smarter and that people can give feedback to the machine. And then, of course, data bias, really, really important when we think about this. How do we actually show what's the quality, what's the quantity of the data? So these are the big areas. We've thought about the business case. Now we need to think about, how do we set things up and build something that people are going to trust when we're building the software? And then when we get to that last phase, to get to that profitable growth, how are we going to set things up for monitoring, for usage, safety, and ultimately ROI? Okay, so I want to hone in on this. A lot of this section is going to be very similar to rapid prototyping or building software, quickly building software that you would already be doing in any sort of initiative. We don't want to change too much there. But there are a few things that we like to do in little tweaks to the process to, again, emphasize the trust factor. The first two are workshops that we developed in 2017. Our director of AI, Chris Butler, he's gone on to do amazing things with Meta and Google. Now with GitHub, he developed these two workshops. And the first is empathy mapping for the machine. So this is taking kind of empathy mapping for people, but layering on the machine aspect of it, understanding what are the rules of engagement for the machine. What does good look like? What does the machine need to say back to the human to build that trust? Confusion mapping for the machine is understanding that in these non-deterministic systems, not everything is going to be nailed, right? We're not going to get 100% accuracy with these things. So we need to know, where are the biggest risks? Where are the areas where the machine is going to go wrong, and prioritize them so we can both design and develop, safety mechanisms and nets for that. And then when we think about process mapping, we think about, okay, we've got our, traditional journey mapping or process mapping, but layering on some very specific elements here around, where do we need information from humans? Where does the machine need to make a decision without human intervention? Where should or can a human intervene? And then lastly, where are the really high risk areas that we need to take a look at? And then we get to the prototyping. I mean, just like you would prototype or build anything, but there are some specific differences that you're going to look at for AI projects. One is we really think about specific design patterns that focus on explainability, on trust. We think about how a user is going to, we're showing the user how a decision is being made. Again, we increase those override possibilities. So we think about those pieces. These are a list of design patterns that we've kind of come up with, best practices, and we'll share some examples of these in a case study in a few here. But I think, again, you want to be thinking about like, what's the right amount of information to show? Are you able to show that model confidence? Can you use familiar patterns so you don't overwhelm people with this new technology? Okay, you've got your designs, maybe you're starting to build your software, you've got some pilot pieces. We're then going to want to test this. And this testing, experiences for trust has two parts. One is the qualitative and one is the quantitative. So with qualitative testing, we really think about a 2x2, learning and kind of affinitizing our research in one-on-one interviews on this 2x2, where we check, where does the user understand something? Where is our user confused by something? And then also, where do they have a positive impression and where do they have a negative perception of the work? And that starts to kind of glean out with us where we might need to improve the UX clarity, where we can have, where we need to do change management, and where maybe we need to actually shift things away so that people don't experience it as much in our interfaces if they have job security concerns, for example. The qualitative is great, but another thing that often comes up, we talked about at the beginning, is hallucinations, right? It's a concern that if we put something out there, especially with LLMs, we're not going to have an accurate answer. And so this is around building out dashboards, building out tests and evaluation suites ahead of time, where you can actually start to run quantitative evaluation on your work itself. So we've been building out a lot of these dashboards that we can, when clients come to us, we can really jump out the ground running. There's tools that you can use on top of Langsmith. There's lots of open source as well as paid tools that you can use around this. But the key is you need to start running these evals where you're using the LLM as a judge and you're able to get a lot more quantitative intel on if your prompting is right, if your model is right, if your training data right, and how are you doing towards your end goals. Again, you're not aiming for 100%, but you're aiming for somewhere in the middle, and you really want to think about these evals before you launch. So you're feeling a little bit confident, right? You're feeling like we've got something, we've tested it with the users, we've used the best practices in the design process, we've done our evals. Now you need to start getting ready for prime time. And so one is get these privacy security guardrails in place. De-identify PII before you send it out. Kind of think about a zero trust architecture. Make sure that you're very clear with the users about how the data is being stored, where is it being used. Do your security testing, right? Do your pen tests, do your security testing with this kind of mindset around the AI, making sure that you're not accidentally leaking really important information to the model companies. Give that opportunity for the humans to be the heroes, for the human override, especially in the early days. What this is going to help you do is actually get your machine smarter, because you're going to learn directly from the humans how that can actually be brought back in. And then lastly, we recommend starting small. Start with a small pilot. Again, this is to production. This isn't just a POC, it's to production, but start small and in a trusted group where you can build that confidence internally. You can monitor those AI responses accurately, get the observability pattern built out. See how are the humans overriding the system? Where are they overriding things? And is that in a good place? And then lastly, even survey your users in line. Are they trusting these results? Why or why not? Start to get that kind of qualitative feedback directly from your users as well. Okay, you've got it, you've launched that pilot. For many organizations right now, AI is still new, and a big challenge is that you have to get that excitement going internally. You have to build that excitement, from that grassroots level. You need to be, if you're doing these AI projects, you need to be the drumbeat for the organization. You have to share, what did you learn? What worked well? What didn't work well? Here's the big win. Here's the ROI that we were able to see. Start thinking about that story early on and sharing that story so that people aren't going to be as scared of this AI stuff, and you can start to see those results. So again, when you really think about this, when you think about how do you build trust systematically throughout the process, we start to see a lot more results starting to come. You don't want to just wait until the very end. You want to really think about it clear systematically and have that as a key part of both the design and engineering process. And then the last secret that I'll share today is really around data. We hear over and over and over, data, 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 right? Your project is only going to be as good as the data. But I think one of the big challenges is that, in 2016, 2017, when we we're doing a lot of ML work, AI work, everyone's like, oh, data is going to be the new oil. We have to set up our systems. We have to get our data ready. We're just not ready for it. And enterprises have a lot of data. But the problem is we're sitting here in 2025, and guess what? I'm hearing the same exact things from leaders 8, 9 years later, same exact things. Our data is not there. It's been 8 years. So what makes you think in the next 8 years you're going to have the perfect data set, right? Don't be paralyzed by trying to build out the perfect complete set. Think about that use case. Many times, if you figure the right use case, or if you focus on the right problem, you already have the data available for it, or pick a problem where you have the data available for it. Now, this doesn't change that you as an organization or your organization do need to be thinking about your long-term data strategy. You do need to be thinking about setting things up properly, and you should start now. Now is better than never, or even tomorrow. But don't let that hold you back from getting the value, because if you do, you're probably going to get wiped away by your competition that is using AI. This was a great quote, right? It's like, again, I think the other problem with data is if you do these big initiatives, and the reason no one has really been successful in doing it in the last 8 years is they shoot so big. And then you don't see the business results because just data alone doesn't give you actually any results. It's how you use that data. How do you actually ultimately do that? So again, this is where we start to think about where do we get the why? How do we get the why into what we're doing with our data and then start to do that? And then how do you, again, as part of those earlier points, how do you find those right use cases to unlock that and build that momentum internally while your data strategy is still being going? We have helped a lot of organizations across the whole data pipeline, the whole data machine learning lifecycle. But I just want to point this out that it is a process, right? This is an ongoing process from data collection, pre-processing. Where do you pull that information in, cleaning things up, continuing to train, continue to test. So start small. Don't start so big. See how you can start small and get those wins and continue to build. And then as you're building your data set, really think about being okay with messy data, especially when we think about designers, right? You're not going to have the perfect set. Be okay with that. Think about how your data labelers that you're maybe building the tools, maybe they need tools. Maybe your designers can help you build tools for the data labelers, which again, will make your systems smarter and better. Bring in, I think another big problem is that teams will just have their data engineers or data analysts, data scientists working on things, but they're not bringing in the business experts and the domain experts. Bring those people in to analyze, to give feedback on the data, to give feedback on what you're doing. They're going to really know the real world implications of these things. So this is where you pull these kind of diverse skill sets together, these cross-functional teams to give that feedback and continue to improve. And then really try to learn where data has some differences. You might see a similar data set in multiple parts of your organization, or you might see a machine learning model give something back that you weren't really expecting. That's okay. Think about where are those data differences and learning from those and progressing you further. So again, just don't let imperfect data hold you back. I think I really encourage teams to try doing things, to try to execute. Think about how do I find a use case where I have enough data, or I just can do a little bit of improvement to my data to move it forward. You're going to need data in this future economy, in this future world, but don't get like so bottled up and end up where we were 7, 8 years ago. I need all the perfect data, and you're back again today. So I want to just quickly pull this all together in a case study, just so you can see how this, theory actually plays out in practice. And then hopefully, from there we can open up for Q&A and see where we go. So this is a project we did with both PwC and Google. Google was trying to get more into, obviously still is trying to get more into enterprise accounts and small business accounts. PwC trying to become more of a technology company, merging those two things together. And we were brought in to work on this field services project, which was a multi-year initiative. This was one of our booths at Mobile World Congress to really start to think about how do we bring PwC consulting expertise, pair that with Google's platform expertise. So we had been building out this project, and we had some pilot customers based on the software we built, and we wanted to think about how could we use AI? How could we use AI to make our project even more valuable? And the first thing we did was, like any good design team, we did a bunch of on-site research. We did a 1-week on-site research trip where we did ride-alongs with people that were building out the gas stations. We understood how the dispatchers worked. We did some workshops with them to really map out what were the process flows of their experience. And we started to notice, and these started to bubble up, that these dispatchers were doing things by pen and paper. They'd been doing the same thing for 40 years. They'd been scheduling things. It was very inefficient. And they were not having enough time to get the input from customers when a call came in about something. They were just putting in, for example, repair pump, pump 4 broken. And this was then causing a truck to get dispatched, a field engineer to get dispatched, and not have the right expertise or the right parts on their truck to execute. So that was started to bubble up with us. But there were some challenges here, right? We needed, like, a dispatcher has been doing their job the same way 40 years. How are they going to change? Why do I need to change? Why should I even trust this thing? Like, what happens if the machine is wrong? What if Joe and Jack, the field technicians, were in a fight at the bar last night? I can't put them on the job together. The human has to have the ability to override the system. Of course, there's going to be some natural kind of tendency to worry about, okay, now if a robot is scheduling, like, what happens to my job? So these were starting to things that we started to kind of map out, and we put together this business plan for this set of features. And this was a little bit, I've kind of tweaked the ROI statement a little bit, because if you think about, we were building a platform for multiple companies, but you do start to see where you say, hey, return trips are negatively impact customer experience. They decrease the margin because people have to go back multiple times. And obviously customers are upset because they want their gas pump or whatever their issue is to be solved. They don't want to be out, they're losing revenue themselves when something's broken. What's our AI solution? We're going to automatically recommend the right technician for the job based on certification, familiarity with the job site, availability, and the parts required for the truck. We think we can, deliver a pretty big ROI within 2 years. And we think we can really hit the business impact. We can decrease return trips, we can speed up scheduling, and we can probably lift customer satisfaction as well. But here's what we need to think about from a key risk and mitigation standpoint. Okay, so we've started to map out, we know what we want to solve, right? But now we need to start thinking about how do we solve this problem from both the technology perspective as well as a design perspective. And so we need to think about, we did our empathy mapping for the machine, right? What are the things the machine needs to sense or know? It has to know inventory. It has to know billing information. It has to know the site billing status, maybe information about the site. It has to know what did the techs already do before. And then our system needs to do things. We want it to do things, right? We want it to kind of create a ticket. We want it to automatically do things. Maybe we want it to say, hey, we need more information. We want our system to start to think and start to maybe not just do things automatically, but really think about the rules. And then think about, okay, what is good for our system? What is bad for our system? If employee morale is bad, it's going to be really tough. And then what does it say? What are the things that we're going to say back to the customer, back to the user? What is the machine going to tell the user to build that trust? And again, we talked about confusion mapping for the machine earlier. How do we think about where things could go wrong? So in our case, in this project, a false positive, as an example, would be that we sent a field technician to a job before it was ready. And that could be a lot of different reasons, but obviously would be a problem. And Conversely, a false negative in our case, as an example of what that could be, would be when a job would just linger in the queue. It wouldn't get assigned to anyone because we needed more clarification, and it would, really drag things on, which would, again, customers wouldn't be happy. It could decrease field technician utilization, reduce billable hours. So these are all things that we had to think about, amongst other things, about what could go wrong. What if our model didn't have enough? And that would then help us prioritize things, both from getting information from the people back, as well as thinking about and working with our engineering team in terms of training the models. And this was more of a traditional ML project. So as we were starting to understand the data, do some of the cleaning of the data to solve this particular problem, and also do some of the ML modeling, we started to look at how do we prototype? How do we actually, design prototypes using our existing framework and get feedback from our end technicians on the work that we're doing? And let's do that user testing. So we again, just like we would any project, we did that user testing. But as I talked about before, we thought about with the user testing piece, we did our traditional, qualitative one-on-one interviews, understanding the system and usability and whatnot. But we also looked at things that were really tied around the AI piece, as I shared before. Where do people understand something? Where do people get confused? Where do people have a positive impression? Where do they have a negative impression? And this was really focused on our dispatchers so we could build that trust. And we started to come across a few things which we've actually rolled into a lot of our principles that we use across this. One was slowing down the process. The machine is actually very fast, and it can calculate hundreds and hundreds, thousands of permutations much, much faster than a human. But for a human, if they saw something that usually took them a lot of time and they got a response back, boom, in an instant, in a half a second, there's actually a bit of a distrust. So we actually slowed down the process. And then the other thing that we did was actually show the person what are the steps that we're taking. What are the things that we're taking each of these steps? You actually start to see this same pattern being used by OpenAI in their O1 model, right? In the reasoning model, they show here's the reasoning steps that we're taking as we go. I don't know if they're fully slowing it down, but I think that one just takes a bit of time. But starting to show that, starting to actually show here's the steps that we're taking. Then when we had a suggestion, we clearly showed, we explained to the dispatchers, here's why the suggestion was made. These were the decisions that the AI had that it used to make the decision. But we also gave them that opportunity to overrule the system so they felt in control. And that feeling of control was very, very important for this use case to build that trust. And then if there was that override, remember I talked about like, oh, Joe and Jack got into a fight at the bar last night. We want to actually train our system to be smarter so we can improve things moving forward. And this will help kind of in that supervised learning capacity where things and users and the machine ultimately get smarter and better over time. And so ultimately, these pieces, we thought about trust, we thought about, we did things methodologically, and it really resulted in a lot of great improvements, right? We were able to reduce return trips by 28%. Our goal was only 10%. We had that lift in customer satisfaction. We decreased the amount of parts trucks, and ultimately we could, actually get people scheduled 10 times faster. But the other really cool thing that happened was that, as I mentioned, this would not have been possible. We would not have gotten the amount of information we needed on the intake forms in the previous setting if we had just kept business as usual. We needed to get that information from people when they called in. And so by freeing up the time, so dispatchers weren't kind of mapping out a schedule all day, we were able to free up that time so that when they had the intake call, we could also present them more questions. We could slow down that process to get the right information, which again, help make the right recommendation to the system and also help make our overall system a lot smarter and better. And then the other thing it did was it actually freed up so much time that they had more time to start doing outbound calls, to do preventive care, which ultimately was a benefit to customer service, but also helped increase revenue. So I think these are the things, not every organization, this was only 2 dispatchers per kind of, company that we were going after, and we saw similar results in a number of our use cases. But I think the important thing here is when you talk about job, speed of executing things with AI, there are going to be some companies that's going to result in job loss. Sure, we can't discount that. But I think a lot of companies are going to use that excess utilization that they're getting out, and they're going to think about how do we do more? Because if everyone is doing this, we just want to kind of continue to expand. We now will always expand our teams to the opportunities that we have at hand. So if we can free up that time and think about how do we leverage humans to much more high value tasks, having a dispatcher map out a schedule, not very high value. Now, having them call, be proactive, that's pretty valuable. And that's pretty much better use of the human skill set as well. So just kind of pulling this all together before we open up for Q&A, and if you still have the Slido there, you'll have access. How thinking about how do we de-risk trust is that first step, right? It's that business case. It's about building the business case, picking the right ROI from the get-go. And then the second step is really around how do you think about rapidly prototyping, building, and testing things with that mindset around trust. And then you're getting that trust. It's around setting yourself up for ROI, for monitoring that usage and safety. Again, prove that value early and often. Think about how you can get that small win to build momentum, but also part of picking that is figuring out what is the right use case to ultimately deliver that value. And then think about trust, right? Think about how do you build that internal and external confidence at every step of the way. And then again, don't let perfect be the enemy of good with data. Too many teams struggle with this. Pick use cases and deliver that data within that. Our AI principles, and again, I recommend every company kind of coming up with their own speed. How do you get things done faster? Small wins, build that momentum, privacy first, explainable AI, that modular tech stack, and ultimately the expert in the loop. We've built some tools. I'll share out these slides, but we've built tools that you can use. Expona is an AI-powered ideation tool that really helps you get quick ideas. I wrote a playbook on how you can use AI in your product development process. The AI readiness assessment will help kind of map out where your organization is in terms of against your peers. And then the AI project rater I touched upon in kind of the prioritization workshop, but we also have a rater. You can find all of these on our website as well under our design-led AI page. The AI readiness and AI project rater are also part of Expona, which is under expona.io. And then I'm working on a set of FigJam templates around a lot of our methodology and for workshops around design-led AI. I'm not quite done with this, but I should have this done by February, I would say. And I'll again share it out with people that made the session today. So as a thank you, and would love your feedback on all of that. And then lastly, I promised at the beginning that if you stuck to the end, I would offer you something. I would be there for you. And so I want to offer up. I will be happy to conduct a 1-hour virtual workshop with your team on the AI use cases and helping you figure out how you can identify and prioritize some AI use cases that will ultimately deliver that value as quickly as possible. What are the outcomes of that? How do you map the business outcomes, finding those, ideating potential use cases, and then ultimately prioritizing them with the focus on speed. So I know I covered a lot in a very, very short amount of time. Hopefully you got something out of it. One of my major takeaways as well is that let's not be afraid of this AI stuff. I think we have a lot of doomer methodology out there. At the end of the day, a computer is just a rock that we've tricked into thinking. So hopefully this gave you something to ponder. And I'd love to hear from you, what questions you might have. I was going through a little faster at the end, so lost my voice. But we have, I think, a Q&A section here. If anyone wants to drop in a question, I'd love to see it. And if not, I'll keep this up for a little bit longer for the questions. But again, thank you so much for joining. I'll share out the slides for this talk later today. And also the recording will continue to be up on LinkedIn. Again, I think a little bit later today we'll have it. So I really would, just thank you for your time, your participation, those quizzes at the beginning here. But yeah, if there are any questions, be happy to answer them. And if not, thank you for your time and have a great rest of your week. Happy Thursday, MLK weekend in the US here. So hopefully you have a restful weekend. Is there any good AI product management resources? Yes, I think there's a lot of product management resources. If you look at my playbook, my AI powered playbook, you'll start to see that there's a lot of resources within there for things. I haven't read this book by Teresa Kane. My friend Teresa Kane just put out a book about product management. I believe there's an example of different AI tooling that can go into that. I think it's going to be a very interesting time period coming up in terms of AI, and there's always new tools coming around. So definitely take a look there. Yeah, non-deterministic. Thank you. I think that is really a key, right? Is that these systems ultimately are different, right? They're not your, they're not your traditional Google Doc where you type something in and you see the result back. There's going to be a little bit of magic that's starting to happen behind the scenes, so to speak. And you need to think about how do you design for these different cases. Think about things more componentized. And in terms of connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. So always shoot me a note on there as well. I haven't thought about this one. Okay, so could you please provide a hands-on example for how you build trust through dashboards? What specific information does a dashboard display for a given model? Good question. And I think there's two pieces to this also. So some of the dashboard stuff that I was talking about in the presentation was really focused on how do you actually show things internally, right? How do you show things internally with in terms of testing the model evaluation, looking at the ROI, looking at the FinOps side of things, and so you can start to understand: are we building something that is good? That are we building something that is of correct quality within things? So I would say that is one piece. You want to set things up so you're starting to learn. And also that's both in the evals is happening before something is launched, more in the experimental phase. And then your monitoring observability is going to be once something is built. These are really tools for internal stakeholders, right? These are tools for building trust internally and showing your leaders, showing other people on other teams that that you're setting things up for success in a good way. On the other side of the fence is, of course, the end users, right? It's around what are the end users getting out of these systems, and how do they feel trust within a dashboard, if a dashboard is showing things that are coming from AI. In that case, I would say the things you need to think about are really focused on that explainable AI piece, right? It's around, why was a decision made? What data was leading to a decision? And then you have things around, okay, we have data that leads to those decisions. How confident are you in information that's being presented? What are things that you can do from a user clarity perspective to share that work? So I think these are the ways that I would look at it from those two angles. But I think there's a really important part that's very different, I would say, than your traditional computer software building when you're thinking about dashboards, which is showing your stakeholders you have run lots and lots of permutations of different prompts of what people could put in, and you feel confident with the evals that you're in the right position. These are what you see with the model companies, by the way, when they're doing a test and they're showing, hey, my model got 80 scored 80 on this test, right? The coding challenge, for example, or the elite score challenge. So these are really the pieces that you want to think about when you're building your solutions to share with stakeholders. So hopefully that was helpful. And of course, anything further, hit me on LinkedIn. We can go further. In terms of role of brainstorming, body storming projects, I think role play is really cool within AI. I know Chris Butler, who I mentioned before, he's been doing a lot of thinking on this, building out some tooling around this, even within like a chat GPT. But one of the really cool things you can do within AI is you can actually use the AI as a bit of a role play person as well. And you can start to think about getting that feedback from someone, and you can actually have them, have the like ChatGPT even take different perspectives, give them different personas to think about. And the other thing you can do is, of course, just like you would do body storming in traditional classic web projects, same thing, right? just before you even get to the software designing and building process, start to think about, having a conversation like, okay, my machine gives me back this. Getting a sense from you or your user, like what is maybe going to be a little bit confusing there. And those pieces actually play a really big role in the empathy mapping for the machine, because you start to understand what are the pieces where my machine needs to get more information back, or I need to get from my user more information to make the system a lot more valuable. AI product monetization and GDM. Again, take a look at my playbook, I would say, on this side of things. There's a lot of great tooling around the go-to-market side in particular, because if you think about, and on the flip side of this is there's also a lot of AI slop being created because of these, go-to-market tools. But the LLMs today are pretty good at content. They're pretty good at like kind of average type content stuff coming out. And look, there's a lot of cold emails, a lot of cold calling that is pretty average. But how you actually step ahead, I think, is where you can use these tools to get a little bit faster, get a little bit smarter. But I think you need to think about how do you actually push ahead within it. But within, I think, any go-to-market, one of the most important things is understanding the market that you're going after. What are their pain points? And I think, tools like Perplexity, tools like Globe Explorer are really good ways to get up to speed on a particular area or market very quickly. You can even start to get a sense from those tools, like where are the biggest challenges, where are the pain points, where are my people that are my user actually hanging out and lurking. And then once you have that sense, you can use things like apollo.io or copy.ai to start doing some of that more automated outreach type work. And reply.com, I think there's a lot of these services within it. Yeah, and I think I see something in the LinkedIn comments around, AI decides it still need to go through UX research for thorough vetting, and 100%. I think that was a big piece, right, of the middle of the design-led AI process is you're doing the UX research. And in fact, you're doing you would still do your traditional research alongside that, and then you would also want to test for specific things around trust. And you would also, of course, before you even got to that, when, the identifying the AI use cases, my example around the PwC Google one, that was, we found those use cases through research, through contextual inquiry, where we actually on site riding around and finding those pain points. Our team, especially as a group of outsiders, never would have found, those pieces that as the biggest pain point by being remote. So I think, research is still going to play a very big role, both for identifying the right use cases and then all the way through making sure people are building the right systems. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This is my contact information, of course, on LinkedIn, where we're all joining this, and happy to connect further if you have any questions. And as I said, we're here to help you accelerate your AI journey. If you want help building these things out, or getting the trust, or getting that ROI, building those use cases, we'd love to chat. So thanks again. Really enjoyed this. Great questions.